The rain was a relentless curtain, mirroring the grim mood that had settled over the precinct. Detective Isabella Diaz stared out the window, the city lights blurring into distorted streaks of color. 3 days. 3 days since the call that had felt like a wrong number, a prank, a cruel joke. 3 days since they'd found the body. A body identified, beyond any shadow of a doubt, as Elias Thorne. Elias Thorne, the local historian, the affable bookshop owner, the man who always had a kind word and a slightly crooked smile. Elias Thorne, who was, at that very moment, presumably at home, probably reading some obscure text on Roman pottery or something equally innocuous. Except, Elias Thorne was also in the city morgue. Essay ran a hand through her already disheveled hair. The forensic report lay on her desk, a crisp white sheet stark against the chaotic piles of case files. She'd read it a dozen times, each time expecting the words to somehow rearrange themselves into something less impossible. Cause of death, undetermined. Advanced decomposition consistent with approximately 72 hours post-mortem. Body temperature, rigor mortis, and livor mortis all align with this estimate. Identification, fingerprints, dental records, DNA analysis, all conclusively match Elias Thorne DOB, April 12, 1978. Distinctive features: scars on left hand, consistent with documented childhood injury, mole behind left ear, healed fracture in left tibia, medical records confirmed. It was Thorne. Undeniably, irrevocably Thorne. Yet Thorne was alive. Captain Davies, a man whose face was permanently etched with world weariness, had called her into his office on that first day, his voice low and gravelly. "DS, you're good with the weird ones. You remember the ghost sightings on Elm Street last year?" ISA suppressed a sigh. The ghost sightings had turned out to be faulty gas lines and suggestible teenagers. But Davies was right. She had a knack for digging through the bizarre, for finding the sliver of logic in the illogical. It was why she was drowning in this impossible case now. "We found him, DS," Davies had continued, rubbing his tired eyes, "in the old Blackwood cemetery. Buried, just shallowly buried. No coffin, just dirt." The image had been sickening. The photographs even worse. The body was bloated, grayish-blue, skin stretched taut over bone. Decay had already begun to consume it. It was a corpse, a thing devoid of life. And yet, Elias Thorne had been seen that morning at his bookshop, the Dusty Tome, a cozy haven nestled on a quiet side street. Mrs. Henderson from the bakery across the road had even waved to him. ISA had personally gone to the bookshop herself. She'd walked in, the familiar scent of old paper and leather filling her nostrils. And there he was, Elias Thorne, behind the counter, meticulously dusting a first edition of Poe. He looked normal. A little pale, maybe, but normal. He'd smiled his usual crooked smile, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Detective Diaz? Is everything all right?" "Mr. Thorne," she'd said, her voice feeling strangely hollow. "We need to ask you a few questions. It's about a body." His brow furrowed. "A body? Oh dear, has something happened?" His concern seemed genuine, almost performative in its normalcy. That was the first seed of unease that had taken root in ISA's mind. His reaction was too practiced, too perfectly calibrated for a man hearing about a dead body for the first time. She'd taken him down to the morgue. The fluorescent glare of the cold room had seemed to amplify the impossible reality. Dr. Anya Sharma, the medical examiner, had been waiting, her expression a mixture of scientific curiosity and profound bewilderment. "Mr. Thorne," Anya had said, her voice carefully neutral, "we have found a body. And we need you to confirm, or deny, if you recognize it." Thorne had approached the gurney, hesitant steps. The sheet was pulled back. The air hung heavy with the metallic tang of blood and decay. He'd looked, really looked. His breath hitched. His face, already pale, drained of color. He swayed slightly, reaching out a hand to steady himself on the cold steel of the gurney. That's me," he'd whispered, his voice barely audible. "That's me." But he hadn't recoiled in horror. He hadn't screamed in disbelief. There was a strange detachment in his eyes, a distant curiosity, like he was observing a particularly gruesome specimen in a museum, rather than confronting his own decaying remains. "Are you all right, Mr. Thorne?" Essay had asked, her voice laced with concern and something else, something colder. He blinked, refocusing on her. "Yes, detective. Just a bit of a shock, you understand. Seeing that." He gestured vaguely at the body. "Rather unpleasant. But yes, I'm fine. Fine." He'd used the word fine with an unnerving frequency since then. Too fine. too calm, too unbothered by the fact that a fully decomposed corpse, identified as him beyond any doubt, lay in a morgue just a few feet away. S.A. rubbed her temples, trying to quell the throbbing headache that had become a constant companion. Logic dictated this was impossible. Reality screamed otherwise. Davies had given her the Thorn case, unofficially of course. There was no crime to investigate, not technically. No murder. No missing person. Just a paradox. But paradoxes, ISA knew, often concealed something far darker. She picked up the phone and dialed Anya Sharma's number. "Anya, it's ISA. Got a minute?" Anya's voice was tired on the other end. "Barely, DS. This Thorn thing, it's not leaving my head. I've never seen anything like it." "Anything new on your end?" ISA asked. "Nothing conventional. I've run every test imaginable. Toxicology, histology, bone density, everything. The body is textbook decomposition. No anomalies except, well, the obvious one." "The obvious one being?" Anya hesitated. "The cellular degradation is accelerated. Beyond what we'd expect for 72 hours. It's almost like the decay is older than it should be." ISA frowned. "Older? How much older?" "Days, maybe weeks. It's hard to say definitively with decomposition rates, but it feels wrong. Like time itself is out of sync." "Time out of sync." The phrase resonated with a chilling unease. It was the kind of language usually reserved for crackpots and conspiracy theorists, not a seasoned medical examiner. "Anya, you think this is more than just a strange coincidence?" There was a long silence on the other end. Then Anya's voice, hushed and barely audible. "DS, I don't know what to think anymore. But something feels very, very wrong. And I don't think it's just the body." The line went dead. SA stared at the phone, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. She had a feeling Anya was right. It wasn't just the body. It was everything. Reality itself felt like it was starting to unravel, thread by impossible thread. The dusty tome was in daylight, a charmingly cluttered space. Sunlight streamed through the large front window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Elias Thorne stood behind the counter, arranging stacks of books with meticulous care. He looked almost normal, except for the faint tremor in his hands, barely perceptible, and the unsettlingly vacant look in his eyes that flickered in and out of focus. SA watched him from across the street, parked in an unmarked car. She'd been observing Thorne for the past 2 days, a silent, watchful shadow. He moved through his days with a strange, detached normalcy. Opened the shop, greeted customers, brewed tea, cataloged books. He performed the motions of Elias Thorne, but there was something hollow about it. She tried to question him again yesterday, more directly this time. "Mr. Thorne," she'd said, sitting across from him in his cluttered office, surrounded by towering stacks of books. "We need to talk about the body again." He'd sighed, a soft, weary sound. "Detective, I told you it's disturbing. But what else can I say? It's clearly a mistake. Some kind of mix-up. A mix-up that includes fingerprints, dental records, DNA, and distinctive physical features?" Isa had pressed, her voice sharp. "That's a very elaborate mix-up, Mr. Thorne." He'd shrugged, a gesture of feigned nonchalance that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm a historian, detective, not a detective. I have no explanation. Perhaps some kind of elaborate prank? A prank that involves burying a decaying corpse in a cemetery?" He'd finally lost his composure, a flicker of something dark and agitated crossing his features. "Detective, please. I am a grieving man. Seeing that replica of myself, it's deeply upsetting. Can we please drop this line of questioning?" Replica. He called it a replica. Not a body, not a corpse, but a replica. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Isa shifted in her car seat, adjusting her gaze on the bookshop. A young woman entered the shop, browsing the shelves. Thorne greeted her with his usual polite smile, recommending a book on local folklore. The interaction seemed ordinary. Painfully, unsettlingly ordinary. But Isa had noticed things. Small things, almost imperceptible, that chipped away at the facade of normalcy. The way Thorne sometimes seemed to pause mid-sentence, as if losing his train of thought, his eyes unfocused for a moment, staring into some unseen distance. The way he occasionally repeated phrases, almost verbatim, within minutes of saying them the first time. The way he sometimes seemed to echo. She'd first noticed it in his bookshop office. She'd asked him a question about his childhood home. He'd answered, describing the old Victorian house with its creaking floors and sprawling garden. Then, a few minutes later, as she was examining a shelf of antique maps, he'd repeated the same description, word for word, as if it were the first time he was mentioning it. When she'd pointed it out, he'd looked confused, then dismissed it with a nervous laugh, attributing it to stress. But it had happened again. And again. Echoes of conversation, snippets of actions repeating themselves, subtly, almost imperceptibly but undeniably there. Like reality itself was stuttering, playing back moments in a distorted loop. She reached for her notebook, flipping through her notes. She'd started documenting these echoes. A whispered phrase, a repeated gesture, a flicker in his eyes that seemed to rewind and replay itself. It was subtle, easily dismissed, but accumulating, becoming a disturbing pattern. Then there was Sarah, Thorne's wife. S.A. had spoken to her briefly, just a courtesy check. Sarah was distraught, understandably. She was clinging to the normalcy facade even harder than Thorne, her denial almost aggressive. "It's just some terrible mistake, detective," Sarah had said, her voice trembling, her eyes red-rimmed. "My Elias is here, he's alive. That thing you found, it's not him. It can't be." S.A. had tried to gently probe, asking about Thorne's recent behavior. Sarah had brushed it off. "He's been preoccupied lately, a bit withdrawn. But that's Elias. He gets lost in his books, you know? Preoccupied, withdrawn. Vague, easily explained." But ISA sensed a deeper unease beneath Sarah's denial. A flicker of fear in her eyes when she talked about her husband, a forced brightness in her voice that didn't quite mask the tremor underneath. Later that evening, ISA drove past Thorne's house, a quaint, ivy-covered cottage on a quiet residential street. The lights were on in the living room. She parked a block away watching. Through the window she could see Thorne sitting in an armchair reading a book. Sarah was moving around in the kitchen, her silhouette flickering against the warm light. They looked domestic, normal. Then something shifted. The lights in the house flickered, just for a fraction of a second, then returned to normal. But in that brief flicker, Isa saw something that made her breath catch in her throat. For a moment, the image in the window wasn't Thorne and Sarah. It was something else. Shadowy figures, indistinct, blurred, like ink bleeding into water. They were in the same positions as Thorne and Sarah, but distorted, corrupted. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the normal image returned. Thorne in his armchair, Sarah in the kitchen. As if nothing had happened. Isa gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Hallucination? Fatigue? Or was it another echo? A glimpse of something else, something underlying, briefly surfacing before being swallowed back into the fabric of reality? She drove away from Thorne's house, the rain starting to fall again, blurring the city lights. The city felt different tonight, colder, more alien. The familiar streets seemed subtly distorted, the shadows deeper, the silence heavier. It was as if the impossible paradox of Elias Thorne's body was starting to infect everything around it, warping reality, fracturing the lines between what was and what wasn't. As she drove, her radio crackled to life. It was dispatch, a routine call. "Detective Diaz, we have a 911 call from Thorne residence, address." "Hold on, this is strange. The caller ID is showing Elias Thorne." S.A.'s foot slammed on the brake, the car screeching to a halt in the middle of the rain-slicked street. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Repeat that dispatch," she said, her voice tight, barely a whisper. The dispatcher's voice, tinny and distorted through the radio, repeated the message. 911 call. Thorne residence. Caller ID. Elias Thorne. Complaint, unknown. The line, it's just static now. Static. The sound of nothingness. The sound of absence. The sound of the void. As they slammed the car into gear and sped towards Thorne's house, sirens wailing, the rain washing away the last vestiges of her carefully constructed logic. Something was terribly, horrifyingly wrong. And it was centered on Elias Thorne. And it was pulling reality itself apart at the seams. The Thorne residence was eerily silent when ISA arrived, sirens abruptly cut off, leaving a ringing emptiness in the rain-soaked air. Patrol cars were already parked haphazardly on the street, officers standing outside, their faces etched with confusion and unease. Captain Davies was there, pacing on the front porch, his face a thundercloud. "Diaz, what the hell is going on?" S.A. shook her head, breathless. Dispatch said. "Thorne called 911? Davies nodded grimly. "Yeah. But the line went dead. Just static. Officers checked the house. Nobody inside. Door was unlocked. Nobody inside. But the call had come from inside. From Elias Thorne. Sa pushed past the officers and stepped into the house. The front door hung slightly ajar, swaying gently in the wind, as if inviting her into a macabre stage setting. The interior was dim, lit only by the flickering streetlights filtering through the windows. The air was cold, heavy with a strange, metallic tang, like ozone mixed with something decaying. "Thorn? Mr. Thorn," Sa called out, her voice echoing unnaturally loud in the silence. Only the drip, drip, drip of the rain outside answered her. She drew her weapon, her senses on high alert. The house felt wrong, hollow, like a shell devoid of any presence, human or otherwise. It was clean, almost too clean, meticulously tidy, yet sterile, devoid of warmth, devoid of life. They moved through the house, officers spreading out, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. The living room was empty. The kitchen pristine. Upstairs, the bedrooms were similarly vacant. Sarah and Elias Thorne were gone, vanished, as if they had never been there at all. Except, in the master bedroom on the bedside table, Isa found something. A photograph. A framed picture of Elias and Sarah Thorne, smiling arm in arm on their wedding day. It was a normal photograph, a happy photograph. Except, something was subtly off. In the photograph, Elias Thorne's face shifted. Just for a moment, in the corner of her eye, his smile twisted into a grimace, his eyes becoming hollow sockets, his skin grayish. Then it was gone, the normal smiling Elias Thorne restored. Sa blinked, her heart pounding. Optical illusion? Another hallucination? Or was the photograph itself infected? Fractured? She picked up the frame, her fingers trembling slightly. As she held it, the air around her seemed to ripple, like heat haze on asphalt. A low hum, almost imperceptible, resonated in her ears. And then, the room changed. Not dramatically, subtly. The colors seemed to deepen, to saturate. The shadows stretched and elongated, becoming darker, more solid. The air grew colder, heavier, pressing down on her lungs. And the silence intensified, becoming oppressive, a suffocating blanket. Isa felt a prickling sensation on her skin, a deep unease that went beyond fear, into something primal, something ancient. She felt watched. Not by physical eyes, but by something else, something vast and unknowable. Then a whisper. Faint, barely audible, like the rustling of dry leaves in a graveyard. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a disembodied voice that resonated directly in her mind, bypassing her ears altogether. Echo. The word hung in the air, vibrating with an unsettling resonance. Echo. She'd heard the echoes in Thorne's speech, in the repeating moments, in the distorted glimpses of reality. Was this connected? Another whisper, closer now, louder, colder. Missing? Missing. Sarah and Elias Thorne were missing. And something else was missing too. Something fundamental. Something real. Isa's flashlight beam fell on the mirror on the bedroom wall. A large, ornate mirror reflecting the room back at her. She stepped closer, her breath fogging in the suddenly cold air. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and drawn in the dim light. Then the reflection shifted. Her image rippled, distorted like the photograph. For a moment, her reflection wasn't her. It was older, gaunt. Her eyes were sunken, hollow, filled with an ancient weariness. Her skin was grayish, stretched taut over her bones like the body in the morgue. Isa recoiled, stumbling back, dropping the photograph frame with a clatter. The mirror shimmered, the distorted reflection flickering, then returning to her normal image. As if nothing had happened. She stared at her reflection, her heart hammering in her chest. Her skin felt cold, clammy. She reached out a hand, touching her face, confirming her own reality. She was still here. Still ISADS. But, for how long? And what was happening to her? To reality itself? The whispers returned, louder now, more insistent, surrounding her, pressing in on her from all sides. Lost. Worlds. Plural. Not just one reality, but multiple? Interconnected? Fracturing? Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted. The air became thick, viscous, like wading through treacle. The shadows deepened, swallowing the light, plunging the room into near darkness. A sense of overwhelming dread washed over Isa, a paralyzing fear that transcended rational thought. She felt like she was standing on the edge of an abyss, peering into something vast, cold, and utterly incomprehensible. Then a sound. A slow, dragging sound coming from somewhere within the house. Like something heavy being pulled across the floor. Scrape, drag, scrape, drag. The sound was getting closer. Slowly. Relentlessly. And with it, the oppressive cold intensified, the shadows deepened, the whispers grew louder, coalescing into a chilling, unified voice. Come home, Elias. Come home to your body. Body. The body in the morgue. Was it calling out? Calling to Elias Thorne? Pulling him back? But back to what? To life. Or to something far, far worse? S.A. felt a presence behind her, a cold, suffocating weight settling on her shoulders. She turned slowly, her gun raised, her hand trembling. In the deepening shadows she saw something. A shape, indistinct, blurred, coalescing from the darkness. It was vaguely humanoid, but distorted, elongated, stretched and pulled out of proportion. Its surface shimmered and flickered like heat haze, or like a reflection in a disturbed mirror. And in the center of the shape, 2 points of light, cold and malevolent, like eyes burning in the void. The shape moved closer, the dragging sound intensifying, the whispers escalating into a deafening chorus. Body. Oh, ears. Isa fired her gun. Twice. The shots echoed deafeningly in the silent house. The bullets ripped through the shadows, but the shape didn't flinch. It didn't even react. It just kept coming, slowly, relentlessly, the cold presence growing stronger, the whispers louder, the darkness deeper. Isa knew with a chilling certainty that bullets wouldn't stop this. This wasn't something physical. This wasn't something she could fight with a gun. This was something else. Something from beyond the fractured mirror of reality. Something that wanted Elias Thorne back. And it didn't care who or what it had to destroy to get him. Isa backed away slowly, her eyes fixed on the approaching shape. It was still indistinct, but as it moved closer, fragments of detail began to emerge from the shadows. She could see hands. Long, skeletal hands with fingers that were too long, tipped with black, sharpened claws. She could see feet. Bare, elongated feet, dragging on the floor, leaving faint trails of something dark and viscous in their wake. And those eyes, those cold, burning eyes, they seemed to bore into her soul, stripping away her defenses, exposing her deepest fears, her most primal anxieties. The whispers coalesced into a single resonant voice, cold and ancient, that seemed to vibrate the very bones in her body. He is ours. The echo is complete. Return him. Go. The word echoed in her mind, resonating with the repeating moments, the distorted glimpses of reality, the body in the morgue, the living Elias Thorne. Go. Was that the key? What do you want with him? Essay managed to ask, her voice barely a croak, her throat tight with fear. She kept her gun raised, though she knew it was useless. She was stalling for time, desperately trying to understand what she was facing. The shape paused, its indistinct form flickering and shimmering. The cold voice echoed again, softer now but no less chilling. He strayed. The thread, frayed. Must be mended. Return to the source. Thread. Frayed. Mended. Source. The words were fragmented, cryptic, but they hinted at something broken. Something out of balance. Something that needed to be fixed. Strayed from what? Essay pressed, her voice gaining a sliver of strength, fueled by a desperate need to understand. What thread? What source? The shape shifted again, its form becoming slightly more defined, resolving into something vaguely humanoid, but still elongated, distorted, unnatural. One of its skeletal hands reached out, pointing a long, clawed finger towards Isa. You see the echo. You sense the fracture. You are touched. You can understand. Touch. She had seen the echoes, sensed the fracture. She had glimpsed the distorted reflections, heard the repeating whispers. Was she connected to this somehow? Was she part of the glitch? An idea, wild and improbable, began to form in her mind, sparked by Anya's words about the accelerated decay, the time being out of sync. What if the body in the morgue wasn't just a body? What if it was an echo of Elias Thorne's future? A future decay somehow displaced, thrown backwards in time? And what if the living Elias Thorne wasn't truly living at all? What if he was tethered to that future echo? His present existence a fragile, temporary anomaly, sustained by some unknown force, while his true self was already decaying, already dead in the morgue? The body, Essay whispered, the realization dawning on her, horrifying and mind-bending. The body in the morgue, it's not his past. It's his future? The shape seemed to ripple as if responding to her understanding. The cold voice echoed, tinged with a faint, almost imperceptible relief. Yes, echo of what was, will be. The thread frayed, time fractured. Is tethered. Must be returned. To completion. Completion. Return him to completion. Return him to his body. Return him to death. Was that what it meant? That the living Elias Thorne was an aberration, a glitch in the machine of reality, and this thing, whatever it was here to correct the error? To pull him back to his predestined decay? But why is he still alive? S.A. asked, her mind racing, trying to grasp the impossible logic of this fractured reality. If his body is already dead, how can he still be here? The shape shifted again, its form becoming more fluid, more indistinct, as if struggling to maintain coherence in this reality. The cold voice grew weaker, fading, as if straining to communicate across some vast, impossible distance. Thread, tangled, time, loops, anomaly, sustained by absence, is echo, holding him here. But thread, weakening, fracture, widening, must mend, before all unravels. All unravels. The words hung in the air, pregnant with terrifying implications. Not just Elias Thorne, but everything? Reality itself? Was this paradox, this impossible crime, a symptom of a larger cosmic malfunction? A tear in the fabric of existence? The shape began to fade, its form becoming more and more indistinct, dissolving back into the shadows. The cold presence weakened, the whispers faded, the oppressive darkness began to recede, replaced by the flickering light of the street lamps filtering through the windows. The temperature began to normalize, the air becoming breathable again. In moments the shape was gone, vanished, leaving only the lingering chill in the air, the faint metallic tang, and the echoes of its chilling words resonating in S.A.'s mind. She was alone again in the Thorne's bedroom, the photograph frame lying on the floor, the mirror reflecting her own bewildered face. The house was silent, except for the continued drip, drip, drip of the rain outside. She understood now. Or at least, she understood as much as a human mind could possibly comprehend something so utterly beyond human comprehension. Elias Thorne was not supposed to be alive. His living existence was a mistake, a paradox, a glitch in the machine of time. He was tethered to his own future decay, his presence sustained by some unknown, fragile force, while his true self was already absent. And that absence, that void where Elias Thorne should have been, was widening, fracturing reality around it. And this thing, from beyond the fractured mirror, it was here to correct the anomaly. To pull Elias Thorne back to his body, back to his death, to mend the frayed thread of time before everything unraveled. But what about Elias Thorne, the living Elias Thorne? Did he know? Did he understand? Or was he just a puppet, unknowingly dancing on the strings of a cosmic paradox? And what would happen to him when the thread finally snapped, when the echo faded, when he was returned? S.A. knew she had to find him. She had to find Elias Thorne before the echo claimed him completely, before the fracture widened beyond repair, before reality itself began to unravel. And she had a chilling premonition that time was running out. Not just for Elias Thorne, but for everything. S.A. raced out of the Thorne house, the rain intensifying, washing the city streets in a sheen of reflected light. She knew where she had to go. The dusty tome. It was the only place that felt connected to Elias Thorne, the only place where his living presence felt real, however fragile that reality might be. She sped through the rain-slicked streets, sirens wailing again, the city lights blurring into streaks of distorted color. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the fragmented pieces of the impossible puzzle. The echo, the fracture, the thread, the source, the completion. It was all so cryptic, so alien, yet it made a terrifying kind of sense. A logic born of unreality. When she reached the dusty tome, the street was deserted, shrouded in darkness. The bookshop windows were dark, the lights off. A chill went through Isa, colder than the rain, colder than the night. She tried the door. Locked. She kicked in the door, the wood splintering, the alarm system shrieking into life, a jarring, discordant sound that shattered the silence. She ignored it, pushing her way inside, her gun raised, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The bookshop was different, colder, stiller. The familiar scent of old paper and leather was gone, replaced by that metallic, ozone-like tang she'd smelled in the Thorne house. The air felt heavy, oppressive. She moved through the dimly lit aisles, calling out Thorne's name. Elias, Mr. Thorne, are you here? Only the echoes of her own voice answered her. The bookshop felt empty. Not just physically empty, but absent. Like the life had been sucked out of it, leaving behind a hollow shell. The books on the shelves seemed duller, their colors faded, their spines dusty and cracked. The air hung heavy with a sense of decay. She found him in his office, slumped in his chair behind the cluttered desk. Elias Thorne. But he was different too. Paler than ever, his skin almost translucent, his eyes wide and vacant, staring into nothingness. He looked ethereal, fading like a ghost about to dissipate. Mr. Thorne. S.A. rushed to his side, placing a hand on his shoulder. He was cold. Ice cold. Like touching a corpse. He blinked slowly, his eyes focusing on her with a detached, distant recognition. Detective. Diaz. His voice was weak, barely a whisper. Elias, what's happening? S.A. asked urgently. Do you understand? Do you know about the body? He nodded slowly, his gaze unfocused, drifting. The body, yes. I see it, sometimes. You see it? When? In reflections, in shadows, it's fading. His voice trailed off, his eyes closing slowly. Fading? What's fading, Elias? S.A. shook his shoulder gently, trying to keep him awake, to anchor him to reality. He opened his eyes again, focusing on her with a flicker of something. Fear? Understanding? I'm fading? Like an echo. He understood. He knew instinctively what was happening. He was fading. His living existence was unsustainable, his tether to reality weakening, his connection to his future decay pulling him back. The thread, he whispered, his voice barely audible. It's snapping. S.A. felt a cold dread wash over her. The thread snapping. The fracture widening. Time running out. We have to get you out of here, Elias, S.A. said, trying to lift him from the chair. He was surprisingly light, almost weightless, like he was already partially insubstantial. He shook his head weakly. No point. Too late. I'm already gone. Suddenly, the bookshop lights flickered violently, plunging the room into near darkness, then flickering back on, then off again in a chaotic, erratic pattern. The air grew colder, the shadows deepened, the metallic tang intensified. The whispers returned, louder, more insistent, surrounding them, pressing in from all sides. Home. Come home. Elias. Thorne gasped, his eyes widening in terror, no longer vacant, now filled with a raw, primal fear. He looked around frantically as if seeing something S.A. couldn't see, something closing in, something inescapable. It's here, he whispered, his voice trembling, his eyes darting around the room. It's coming for me. The dragging sound began again, closer now, louder, scraping across the floorboards of the bookshop, coming from somewhere in the back room, relentlessly approaching. S.A. drew her weapon, scanning the darkness, her heart pounding against her ribs. She didn't know what she was going to fight, what she was going to shoot, but she knew she had to do something. She couldn't just stand here and watch Elias Thorne fade, be taken by whatever was coming for him. Elias, hold on, S.A. shouted, trying to pull him to his feet. But he was limp, unresponsive, his weightless body sliding through her grasp. He was already dissolving. The back room door creaked open slowly, agonizingly, revealing a deeper darkness within. The dragging sound intensified, the whispers grew deafening, coalescing into a chilling, unified voice that resonated throughout the bookshop, shaking the very foundations of reality. Elias, come home. The shape emerged from the darkness of the back room, slowly, relentlessly, the distorted humanoid form, the skeletal hands, the burning eyes, the shimmering, fractured surface. It was closer now, more defined, more terrifying than before. It reached out a long skeletal hand towards Elias Thorne, who was slumped in his chair, his eyes closed, his body still, his breathing shallow, almost imperceptible. He was almost completely faded now, a ghost in his own life, an echo about to disappear. S.A. raised her gun, aiming at the approaching shape, her finger tightening on the trigger. But she knew deep down that it was pointless. Bullets wouldn't stop this. Logic wouldn't stop this. Reason had no purchase here. She was facing something beyond human comprehension, something ancient, something vast, something that was determined to correct a glitch in the fabric of reality, even if it meant erasing Elias Thorne from existence. And as the shape reached Elias, its cold, skeletal hand closing around his fading form, S.A. knew, with a chilling certainty, that she was about to witness something truly horrifying. The final snap of the thread. The ultimate widening of the fracture. The complete unraveling of everything. Then everything went silent. The whispers stopped. The dragging sound ceased. The lights in the bookshop stabilized, returning to a dim, flickering normalcy. The cold presence vanished. The metallic tang faded. S.A. stood frozen, her gun still raised, her breath held tight in her chest. She stared at the empty chair behind the desk, where Elias Thorne had been moments before. He was gone. Completely, utterly gone. As if he had never been there at all. Only the faint scent of old paper and leather remained, a ghostly echo of a life that was never meant to be. In the chair where Elias Thorne had been sitting, lay a single object. A small leather-bound book. S.A. approached cautiously, her hand still trembling, and picked it up. The book was old, worn, its pages yellowed and brittle. There was no title on the spine. Just silence. She opened the book. The pages were blank. Completely, utterly blank. Not just empty but devoid. Like the paper itself had been erased, leaving nothing but absence. S.A. closed the book slowly, her hand numb. She looked around the bookshop, the silent, empty aisles, the faded books, the lingering chill in the air. It was over. The echo had faded. The thread had snapped. The fracture had been mended. And Elias Thorne was gone. Returned to his body. Returned to his death. Returned to a completion. And in the silence of the bookshop, Isa realized, with a chilling certainty that resonated to the core of her being, that the truly horrifying truth wasn't just the paradox of Elias Thorne. It was the terrifying, mind-bending reality that lay beneath it. The reality that time wasn't linear, that reality wasn't fixed, that the threads of existence were fragile, easily frayed, easily broken. And that sometimes, when reality glitched, when the machine malfunctioned, when the echo called, there was nothing anyone could do to stop the inevitable. The universe corrected its errors. And sometimes correction meant erasure. S.A. walked out of the dusty tome, leaving the splintered door swinging open in the rain. The sirens were still wailing in the distance, the city lights still blurring in the rain-soaked night. But everything felt different now. Colder. More alien. Less real. She looked up at the rain-streaked sky, the dark clouds swirling above her, mirroring the chaos in her own mind. And she knew, with a chilling, bone-deep certainty, that she would never look at reality the same way again. The body that was found, before the person went missing, it wasn't just a case. It was a glimpse into the void. A terrifying, unforgettable glimpse into the fractured mirror of existence. And the reflection staring back was cold, empty, and utterly chillingly blank. Just like the pages of the book she now carried, a silent, empty testament to a reality that had unraveled, and then, impossibly, been stitched back together, leaving only absence behind. The rain continued to fall, washing away the city, washing away the logic, washing away the light, leaving only darkness and the unsettling echo of silence. And in that silence, Isa could almost hear the whisper of the void, a chilling reminder that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, some truths are too horrifying to bear, and some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed.